Hi, this is Military Politics Research Paper, Admiral Shin by Simon Guo. How does the government ensure that the military is effective at repelling the enemy while the military must not disobey the government and take over? There are lots of theories and factors like Hamilton, much objective control, subjective control, institutional lens, psychological/cultural lens, different, event, favor, and proofs. The reason why I mention all of this is how I want the readers to know about all of the theories while they are thinking about the Admiral Shin. Because although there is no overarching framework for judging which is the best CMR, those arguments are still useful to look at what is the ideal CMR. That is why when I look at how the Joseon dynasty of Korea negatively affected the Admiral Shin's ability to fight in engine war, I want the readers to think about various theories about how each author has provided. This is because I will argue that Admiral Shin is an example of how the government must make sure that the military must be effective at repelling the enemy while remaining loyal. In order to talk about why Admiral Shin is ideal Admiral, I do have to talk about his childhood, but I first want to talk about my belief on how the moral characters have much more significance in the CMR theory. This is because whenever I read various authors' statements about how their theories explain the CMR the best, I don't feel like there is great emphasis on the personal moral characters. This is because I believe that ensuring the military leaders' moral characteristics don't rebel against the government is one way that the government can make sure that the military doesn't rebel. I think that this is a common theme with the Admiral because he never complains and he often had to do the impossible odds without any complaint. That is why I believe that a moral character has much more significance in the CMR than what the other authors have suggested. Anyway, there is also another thing that I wanted to talk about before I talk about the childhood, because I want to talk about how some theories may not apply. For example, like Joseon during this time is not it is a non-United States example, and like Hamilton theory may not be applicable because it is often criticized that Hamilton theories is not applicable to the non-United States cases. Another one that is not applicable is the Cornelius theory because Korea during this time is a hierarchical system. That is why Cornelius theory where the military, the political elites, and the military have a cooperative relationship won't work here. With all of that settled, I can now talk about Yi's childhood. When I read about him, I feel like there is a greatness in him already because as a child, he has the charisma of a leader as when he played the war game with other children often selected him as a leader. Not to mention how he is so mutually righteous that other adults in the village treated him as an adult. His family is from noble birth, but it should be mentioned that his family is mainly civil functionary whose fortune has begun to decline long before the Isushin has been born. So it is strange that he wanted to join the military because it would have been better for him to become a civil functionary in order to raise the prestige of his family. But he decided to join the military anyway because he wanted to be a soldier ever since he was a little boy. That is why he began to spent 7 years on studying for the first exam for the military service, but he failed when he fell off the horse. But he later, 4 years later, passed the second exam when he passed it in 1576. He joined the military afterwards, but this is where he faced the corruption in both the government and the military officials. This is because there was lots of corruption during this time. For example, M. General Yi Lin falsely accused Yi Shin of the desertion because he was jealous of Yi Shin's accomplishment. Yi would be temporarily stripped of his rank, and this happened quite often. But nevertheless, Li would continue to serve for his country. During this time, there was a rumor that the possible Japanese invasion was going to happen during the year of 1588. So while the military official and the government official were caught off guard when the recently unified Japan invaded the Joseon in the year of 1592, he was one of the first who was prepared. Now, I can talk about how I can compare and contrast between American Joseon for the CMR. I will do the American first. We learn in class how there's always a struggle on how the government and the military is careful to not to overlap their responsibilities and power. And we also learn in the class how this is a problem when there was a military dissatisfaction with the Bush White House and the Rumsfeld. This is because they were due to the two assumptions. The first assumption is how the military official had the right to say in the matter. Second assumption is how the military advice is superior to the civilian government opinion due to how military should know more about how to conduct the war properly. There is some truth to this assumption, as the military official do have a right to say by advising the civil official, while the military advisors should in theory be superior because they should know how to conduct more properly as they are more directly involved. But the problem with the first assumption is that they cannot advocate to get what they want. They can only advise. This is because the military should ultimately obey the government and follow orders, as George C. Marshall said. Military officials can share the concern, but ultimately they have to follow it. This is because it should be the civilians who protest if the government official did something wrong, but not the military. Doing more than more advising will lead to unhealthy civil-military relationship, and it may even lead to a coup. Military dissatisfaction with Rumsfeld deal with the second assumption about if the military's advice is superior to civilian government opinion, or rather in this case, Rumsfeld's opinion about transformative war. This caused conflict with the Sanskrit Army Chief of Staff and Rumsfeld, Secretary of Defense, as they have different vision for the army. Rumsfeld's vision involved using a lighter force which used the light forces with the precision weapons, while the Sanskrit vision involved using preponderance heavy forces. Since any program that wasn't in line with the Rumsfeld vision are expendable, this included the Army Crusader artillery program. Although Turkey managed to avoid this by the spending cut by making the crucible lighter and thus more deployable, this incident caused further worsen the relationship. Now, the Rumsfeld had authority to do all of this, but the problem arose when he had the habit of selectively filtering or receiving the information. And this is a problem because he likes to surround himself with the yes man who will agree with him, and he likes to replace the person that he disagree with the person he agree with. That is why this caused trouble with the scheme, because although Rumsfeld never officially filed scheme, it was leaked that Rumsfeld was intending to replace him. That is why when the actual person who had replaced the Kun, the Peter Schoolmaker, he was the type of person who was most likely going to agree with Rumsfeld more. This is a problem because there's now no one to suggest the alternative to Roosevelt that might be better than the current choices. For example, now there will be no one to tell Roosevelt to consider how further reinforcement or resupply may be necessary for the post-war stabilization. Of course, not all the blame can fall upon the Roosevelt, even the army didn't consider the insurgency to be a problem. The mistrust created from this incident, however, did lead to bad CMR. I will now talk about the Joseon CMR. Although Joseon is a different country compared to the United States of America, there is still expectation that the military official from Joseon must obey the king in the end. They can advise the king for the better alternative, but military officials must ultimately follow the king's order. When you consider that Joseon is a democratic nation like America, it becomes more obvious that Joseon military have no choice to obey unless they want to be accused of treason. Not to mention how the Joseon president cannot even think of arguing against the government, while the American citizen can against the American government. That is why it could be said that Joseon CMR is much more enforced for the government than the American CMR would ever be. That is why it is frustrating that Lee Sun-shin has no choice to obey even when Joseon government was so incompetent. Because some of the examples was when Japanese double agent tried to trick the Joseon government into sending Lee Sun-shin into a trap. Lee Sun-shin didn't fall for it because he was suspicious of a trap, but when King Sojong heard about this, he was paranoid that Lee Sun-shin was trying to take over. Of course, Lee Sun-shin would never do that, but King Sojong was so afraid of this that he actually ordered the execution of Lee Sun-shin for his so-called disloyalty. Many of the Lee Sun-shin camp managed to persuade King Sojong to lower the punishment into the demotion and imprisonment. The problem here was how this was happening. King Sojong has replaced insurgent with Won Gyung. The problem with Admiral Won Gyung is how he is very incompetent admiral that had to scuttle his ship without ever fighting the enemy because of his negligence during the first wave of Japanese invasion, and had to be rescued by Isshin later. That is why it is not surprising that Won Gyung would fell into an enemy's trap, and all of the Joseon fleet was nearly destroyed. Realizing his mistake, King Sojong has hastily reinstalled the Lee Sun-shin back into the supreme commander of the naval garrison. With that already explained, now I can talk about whether is Yi Obai superior to the Joseon government's opinion. The answer is, I think, is yes. Of course, This doesn't mean that Isusin can just order the government around, but just the fact that his advice would be superior. Anyway, the reason why I'm confident about this because this is due to his father's victory record. He never lost a ship under his command, still managed to do all of this when he never conducted a naval battle before. He was a diligent tactician, savvy with the old technology like the turtle ship. He was forward thinking that never allows the enemies to get close with the boarding party as he destroyed the enemies from far away with the long range cannons. When you consider all of these factors, Wang Geon doesn't even hold a candle against Yi. This is especially true when you consider that Wang Geon had the Admiral's fleet when Admiral Yi's fleet when Yi was in prison, and he took possession of it in the fight against the Japanese armada. But the problem was Wang Geon couldn't use the full potential of the Yi's fleet. That is why it is no surprise to me that Yi is the very superior in every way. That is why, although I believe that his government wasn't the best example of ideal CMR, the Admiral Yi Sun-si was the best example of CMR. The conclusion is how I mentioned various details made by different authors who try to explain what the best ideal CMR is. The problem is that there is no overarching framework for CMR. That is why I had to be satisfied with using theories and examining civil-military relations. I, however, still wanted to research someone who I consider to be ideal CMR. That is why I explored what kind of CMR the Admiral Yi Sun-sin had when he fought in the Indian War. What I found was that he was the kind of person that is needed for ideal CMR to happen. This is because Admiral Yi Sun-sin is an example of how the government can relax knowing that despite how the military has the power to rebel if he wants to, a man like Yi Sun-sin will stay loyal to the government. There is a reason why Admiral Yi Sun-sin's post title is called Marshal Duke of Loyalty.